Look, if you called the Vikings knocking on the door last year of winning the 1 seed in the NFC with Sam Darnold at quarterback, you're probably lying, because let's be real, even Vikings fans didn't expect that. I'm not going to say that Minnesota came out of nowhere in 2024, but they certainly overperformed expectations. The offense was deadly even while dealing with key injuries, and the defense was just a straight-up buzzsaw all year long. Even with their few notable flaws, this was easily one of the most complete teams in all of football last year. But here's the thing, considering all the additions they've made to an already really good roster this offseason, if JJ McCarthy is even 80% of what they had last year with Sam Darnold, they might be even better. And yes, I know the words might be are kind of carrying a lot of weight there, but still, this is a really, really good team. And if you're new here, by the way, this is day 15 of the annual Bootleg Summer Series. And in each one of these episodes, we use film, analytics, salary cap breakdowns, and all manner of nitty-gritty football nerddom to answer the 3 questions that make up the central pillar of this series. What was this team's identity before? What is their identity now? And what does a successful 2025 season for this team actually look like? That last question is a little bit complicated for Vikings fans because it's tough to say the goal is to just exceed being a 14-win team, especially with a new quarterback this year who's essentially having his real rookie year. But maybe, just maybe, walk with me here. This is going to be a better team with a worse record. That sounds kind of doom and gloom, but trust me, it's not. And if you stick with us for the next hour or so, or however long this show ends up being, you'll find out why. So Jay, Autumn, Anthony, please roll the intro.
Thanks for stopping by. This is the Bootleg Summer Preview Series. I'm EJ, that's Brett, and today we are talking about all things Minnesota Vikings. It was Reese Bobby who famously said, "If you're not first, you're last." And while that's not technically true, probably felt like that for the 2024 Minnesota Vikings because 14 wins usually wins you your division and has you in contention for the top seed overall. They didn't even win their division. That's bananas. Kevin O'Connell's team was very, very good last year, but they decided to make some big changes going into 2025. And today we are going to talk about all of those changes. Brett, I have to ask you, as a founding member of the JJ McCarthy fan club, are you more excited or nervous for 2025?
Ooh, that's a good one. Honestly, kind of both, right?
Yeah.
Because I was one of the people that had JJ McCarthy as QB4 in that class. Not that I disliked Penix and Bonix. I the entire top 6 I was a big fan of. But I was a JJ McCarthy truther, as the kids call it. And I caught a lot of flack for that. And me and Thor Nystrom, I think, were valiantly fighting the good fight on Twitter for months and months and months. And then, of course, he went to the perfect situation, i.e. a Kevin O'Connell offense. And he's got JJ and he's got Darisaw coming back. Or rather, last year he had Darisaw healthy, and you saw the weapons and the system were like, yes, this is great. He's going to start, and I think he's going to be in contention for Rookie of the Year. And he played that one preseason game, and we're like, oh baby, we're cooking. Like I had a good quarterback take. It actually finally happened. And then like 3 days later, it's like, oh yeah, he's out for the season. We're like, fuck, okay. Well, it was a good 24 hours, EJ. But I was a JJ McCarthy truther. I still am a JJ McCarthy truther. I am nervous from the standpoint that it's a really tough act to follow, right? To win as many games as they did last year, even though they were a wild card team, let's be honest, in most years they wouldn't have been. That is a really tough act to follow. Sam Darnold was brilliant for them. There were issues that Sam had against a very particular coverage that kind of bit them in the ass late in the year, and we'll get into that, of course. But for the most part, Sam was spectacular. And if McCarthy is even 80% of what Darnold was last year, that will be a successful season. But I do worry about all the people that are going to be directly comparing what the Vikings record is this year to what the Vikings record was last year, and comparing what McCarthy's stats are this year to what Darnold's stats were last year. And I hope that doesn't get to JJ, because I think there is a way for us to consider this a successful quote unquote rookie season for McCarthy, while also acknowledging that he's probably not going to be what Darnold was last year. If he was what Darnold was last year, that would be incredible. Hell, he might be in contention for like comeback player of the year if he has a Darnold type season. But I'm nervous because I know that it's very, very hard for this narrative to go positively for him because that bar was set so high. But I am excited to see him play.
I'm going to have this discussion right now then, because you queued it up beautifully. If JJ McCarthy, we're just going to call him a rookie, folks. We realize it's his second year, but it's his first full year playing. If he was able to match what Sam Darnold did last year, that would be Herculean to refresh. Sam Darnold last year, 4,300 yards, 35 touchdowns, 12 picks, a 14-win record, got them to the playoffs. So I'm not going to compare him to Darnold. I'm going to say if JJ McCarthy does that as a rookie, that is almost identical to one Justin Herbert's rookie year in 2020. Like, the numbers are scary close. So Justin Herbert as a rookie in 2020, 43-36 for yards, 31 TDs, and 10 picks. He was also rookie of the year that year. So that's rookie of the year type stuff. Best rookie quarterback season we have seen in some time, excluding Mr. Jaden Daniels from last year and what he was able to accomplish. But, 5 years ago, Justin Herbert was setting the standard for outstanding rookie quarterback play. Now, I would argue that the cast around JJ is a little bit better than the cast was around Justin Herbert, but that is an extremely high bar to say, if you're going to be a success, you not only have to match what the guy did before you, but that's at the pace of one of the best rookie seasons we've ever seen in history that happened 5 years ago. That's a tough way to sort of win. So I like the idea of some nuance and saying, if JJ is able to power this team and keep them moving in a way that keeps them in contention for the top of this very tough division, that too can be a success, even if he only passes for, say, 3,800 yards and maybe only passes for 25 or 28 touchdowns. And instead of saying, well, he's not Darnold or he's not Herbert, realizing those were two exemplary seasons and he's doing just fine if the Vikings are in contention at the end of the year.
Also, I want to note, so we're recording this on July 16th. I think by the time it goes live, I think it's one of the first days of Vikings training camp, I believe. So we're going to see, McCarthy stat watch every single day where media is going to tweet out completion percentages and everything like that. I want to caution people against following that too closely, because as somebody who has stood on the sidelines with media at a training camp before and listened to what they consider to be a bad rep and what they consider to be a good rep, not exactly a reliable narrator. So I would say see what he looks like in the preseason before you make any sort of judgments about how JJ looks to be coming off that knee injury, because just reading reports on Twitter can be, let's say, dubious at best.
Misleading, and there's a couple things about that. What you said is very, very true. In training camp, oftentimes a check down that's a completion is not seen as a win by the coaching staff. The play was supposed to go somewhere else. Oftentimes a young signal caller doesn't see that, checks it down. It shows up as a completion on the stat sheet, which I hate to label as such in the preseason, but everybody goes, ooh, he completed the pass. Well, he completed a 4-yard pass. He was supposed to complete a 14-yard pass. It was open and he missed it, and the coaches ripped him for it. That's the place to have that happen. So it's a weird thing that we do. Let him have his breathing space. Again, when the bullets start flying for real in, live action, even if it's preseason, yes. The other positive here is he's had a long time since the injury, and it was more of a cleanup than a full-on reconstruction. So both of those things bode well for him coming out healthy and at as close to full strength as he can be. If he'd been hurt in, late October or mid-November, we'd be talking about a very different thing here. So those are both positives, but yeah, give I'm just going to say rookie some space, some grace here. So let's take a look at, again, this very high bar that Kevin O'Connell's team set last year in 2024. 14-3. Normally Normally, if a team goes 14-3, I don't care what division you play in. That is a division-winning team that is, again, contending for the top spot in their conference. Was not so for the Vikings last year because of the team we'll talk about tomorrow, but the rank in the division ended up being second. Sterling home record, 8-1. Road Warriors as well, 6-2 on the road, and 4-1 in their last 5 games, absolutely dueling the Lions down the stretch. They did not give the Lions an inch, and the Lions didn't give any ground back either, end up winning the division. In terms of power score, when we're talking about whether or not a team is good at football, we talk about the ability to pass the ball, run the ball, defend the pass, defend the run, points scored and points allowed. I'm actually going to group all the offensive stuff together for them because passing offense was 11th best in the NFL. Rushing offense was 22nd. And normally you'd look at that and say, oh, well, you can't win with a 22nd best rushing attack. You need to run the ball at least middle of the pack. No, they were 9th in points scored. This was a top 10 scoring offense with the 22nd best rushing attack in the NFL. When I say during this portion of the show over and over again, you don't need a top rushing attack to win in the NFL. Case in point, 2024 Minnesota Vikings. Defense was elite, top to bottom. Pass defense, second. Rush defense, second. Points allowed, 5th best scoring defense in the NFL. These guys are killers under Flores. So you take all those ranks, which are all pretty good, add them up, divide by 6th, and the Vikings had the 6th most powerful score in the NFL, the 6th most powerful team in the NFL, and they were still second in their division. It's just unfair.
This graphic that you had up, I think, is a perfect representation of you don't need to be good at running the ball for play action to work, right? You can be a below average rushing offense. Linebackers still have to react to it. Safeties still have to react to it. Like the coverage structure is the coverage structure. The rules are the rules. The fits are the fits. Like the defense still has to respect it, even if you're just mildly almost okay at it. Very rarely is a team so bad at running the ball that you don't have to respect it whatsoever. Like the Raiders last year, they were so terrible that like nobody cared if they even tried. With the Vikings, like, yeah, they were 22nd, but you still had to play the run. You still had to respect it, especially because this is a team. Hold on, let me pull up my stats here. If you're looking at first down run rate, they were 3rd in first down run rate. It doesn't mean that they were good at it, but they certainly showed it to you. Like 57% run the ball on first down is a lot. Where they then dropped down was in second down run rate. They were 22nd in second down run rate. So a lot of it was we're going out there, we're running the ball on first down, whether we succeed or not, we're then going to call play action on second down. And my God, they were good at play action. And Sam Darnold specifically was really, really good at play action. Off the top of my head, if I recall correctly from the Seahawks episode, he was 4th in terms of yards per attempt from under center play action in the entire league. And 2 of the guys ahead of him, again, if I recall correctly, were like Goff and Stafford, who are great, right? So if you're looking at how this offense was structured, it was more so about, we know you have to respect this enough so that we can get into what we really like to do, which is taking shots down the field, getting explosives off play action. We have Justin Jefferson. You don't have anybody that can cover Justin Jefferson. We've got Addison. We've got our tight ends. Like they even had some running backs that could do some damage through the air out of the backfield. And even though their pass protection was not good in terms of straight drop back pass scenarios, like they were awful, especially after Darisaw got hurt. When you call play action so much, it almost kind of mitigates, not mitigates, but it doesn't expose you as much to how bad they were in pass pro, because obviously pass protection works differently off play action than as a straight drop back, because the defensive line has to respect the run fake. It then takes them a little bit longer to get off the block. Like it just buys you a little bit of extra time. And that's partially why they lean so much into play action, is because they knew they couldn't just drop back and pass protect. So everything in this offense was built around play action. They were exceptional at it. And that was also why they were able to start games so fast. Like if you're looking at the true identity of this team, like they got on you immediately. They were able to score in the first quarter. They were able to put points on the board, and they were able to put you into an uncomfortable situation right away so that then Brian Flores could do what Brian Flores does and blitz you to death.
It's symbiotic football, one side supporting the other, and Kevin O'Connell's offense can come out and put its foot on your neck pretty often, start to turn it into a boat race so you can't run the ball as much, or the threat of that is you've got to be really certain as an opponent of the Vikings that you're committing to your run game and that can bring you some kind of control and limit possessions. There are teams like that, but not very many. You better have a top 10 rushing attack if you're going to lean on it like that and say, okay, we're going to slow down the racehorse here and limit possessions and try and win it in the end of the game. Most teams react very differently to falling behind and they start to throw. And if you start to throw, Brian Flores is going to blitz your face off.
There's a lot of the stats that I'm about to list off, by the way, that are found in our companion infographic. So if you want our coverage data, especially by down and distance, if you want the blitz data by down and distance, that's all over in our companion infographic over on Patreon, link in the description below, or at the QR code on the screen. There's like 18 pages of it. There's even like passing maps, there's cap allocations, all the data you could ever want. So most of what I talk about right now is going to be in there. But I want to kind of paint a picture using the important parts of that data for how this team married the offense with the defense, to your point. So it started out with a tremendous Kevin O'Connell game plan, week after week, game after game. This is a team that even though they were 21st in plays ran in the first quarter, they led the league in first quarter scoring. Their average yards gained per play in the first quarter was 6.4, so I'll just call it 6.5. So basically, you run 2 plays and you get a first down. Wash, rinse, repeat, work your way down the field, score points. They scored 72 first quarter points on offense. Doesn't include special teams, doesn't include defense. Like that is just straight touchdowns in the first quarter. 72 all year long. The Bears scored 12, to put it in perspective. So that's what the best and the worst is in the entire league. Kevin O'Connell can really, really script a first 15. And the advantage that gave them was that this defense had the third most snaps in the entire NFL, where the margin of score or the point differential, words, Brett, point differential was greater than 7 points. So they had a shit ton of snaps where it wasn't really a close game and they could kind of just unleash the hounds. And that also really affected run pass splits against this defense. They had the 29th lowest run rate against them as a defense. So third most snaps where the point differential was greater than 7, fourth fewest snaps in terms of percentage of runs faced. That then led to a formula where Brian Flores could blitz and blitz and blitz and blitz again. Famously, this team was 29th in man coverage and 4th highest in zone coverage. And that was because they called a shit ton of fire zones. They were first in first down blitz rate. They were first in second down blitz rate. And they finally eased off on third down and went down to 17th. But it was just fire zone, fire zone, fire zone, because they knew you weren't going to run the ball. They knew that their number one directive was we're going to attack pass protection. And if they happen to run, we'll just get the running back on the way to the quarterback. Like that was their mentality for how they played the run. Now, their coverage structures in terms of how they called their zone blitzes was obviously very different than most other teams. They called a lot more quarters fire zones compared to the standard 3-3 fire zone. We'll get into that in a little bit. But overall, from an identity perspective, it was Kevin O'Connell gave them a lead. Brian Flores smelled blood in the water. First down blitz, second down blitz, get into third down. It's 3rd and 9. Okay, now we'll just play quarters and we'll go let our pass rushers win. And they just kind of repeated that formula week after week after week. And they jumped on you early and suffocated you for the following 3 quarters after that. And very few teams could handle it. It was basically only the Rams, the Lions, and to a degree, the Packers that had offensive success against Brian Flores because it's Sean McVay, it's Matt LaFleur, and it's Ben Johnson, who are all very familiar with Flores and familiar with his style and familiar with the types of blitzes that he called. And they didn't panic because they've seen it before. And they didn't allow themselves to get sucked into a pass mentality. It was very much like, okay, we're down by 7. Let's run the ball. Let's not panic. Let's act like this game is still close because it is. And if we allow him to call the game as if it's a blowout, that's when it will turn into a blowout. They never panicked. They stuck to the script. They went under center. They ran the ball. They called play action, and they eviscerated him. They were the only 3 offensive coaches to really have success against him because they didn't panic and they didn't play into the script. But for everybody else in the NFL, the Vikings were really good at writing that script and then kind of forcing you to follow it, and they killed everybody.
The front 7 in this defense that we're talking about, led by Brian Flores, are a bunch of dogs. And specifically, I'll call them the back 4. It's really more 5 and 2 if you're talking about outside linebackers, but he does use them creatively. And those guys, Jonathan Grenard, Van Ginkel, Cashman, and Ivan Pace Jr., the way he uses those guys, I'm going to say in concert with the rushers he has up front and the variety and versatility of the rush paths and the assignments and how they switch from down to down, keeps people guessing, and he will, as you laid out with all those stats, relentlessly bring the hammer. It's one of the reasons why this defense is so much fun to watch, because the defense is full of dogs and he lets them off the chain every single week. And when you turn in to watch a Vikings defensive performance, you're going to see 1, if not 2 or 3 of those guys go off throughout the game and just wreck shop. And it's a ton of fun.
Now, as for how to beat it, again, there were really only 3 offensive coaches that did that really well last year, and it was the ones that understand how he calls this defense. It's a little bit unorthodox. Again, most fire zones in the NFL, it's going to be a 3-3 structure, so 3 deep, 3 underneath, 5 guys rushing. As for who those 5 are, it can be a nickel, it could be a linebacker, it could be a safety. Like, he's not going to tell you which 5. That's kind of the point, right? But the zone distribution is just going to be some fancy way of getting into a 3-3 for most teams. There was only 3 teams in the NFL that out of all of their fire zones, 40% or more of them were a 2-deep structure instead of a 3-deep structure. Those 3 teams were Kansas City, Cincinnati, and Minnesota. I think 4th place was like 19%. So again, huge drop off from the top 3 that ran a lot of 2-deep fire zones compared to everybody else that ran a lot of 3-deep fire zones. That was also, spoiler alert for the Colts episode, that was why the Colts brought in Bynum, because Lou Anarumo is now in Indy and Bynum understands these coverage structures. So he brought him in there to kind of help get them all on the same page. Now, what running a bunch of 2-deep fire zones does is it puts a ton of stress on those linebackers that you just talked about. And it takes a special linebacker in coverage, i.e. Blake Cashman, to make it all work, right? Because you have, especially if you're running a quarters fire zone, you don't have 3 guys underneath. Now you have 2 players that have to cover the entire underneath area of the field, and especially underneath over the middle, while also playing the run. So if you have a linebacker that has exceptional feel for how to get into passing lanes and he understands route concepts and, okay, this receiver releases this way, so I can expect the other receiver to then end up in this area of the field. Let me drift, an extra 2-3 yards this direction so I can deny that throw and then get back. Like having a linebacker with that kind of feel is a super weapon. And you saw that play out for Minnesota when they had Blake Cashman, but more importantly, when they didn't have Blake Cashman. And Metellus, I love the kid. He's versatile. He's not Blake Cashman in coverage. And there were, that kind of dip in the middle of the season that the Vikings had on defense, where they went against Sean McVay and they went against Ben Johnson. That was because they didn't have Blake Cashman. And those 2 play callers just relentlessly attacked the hook zone defenders over and over and over again, because there was so much damn space in these coverage structures. And if you don't have the guy that can operate in space that way, you're fucked, like completely fucked. And they exploited under center play action over and over and over again and just attacked Metellus relentlessly. And they didn't really have an answer. So, for Brian Flores, I think number 1 goal for this year is to have a plan if his linebackers can't do that. Because I think they got a little bit comfortable mid-season because they just kind of kept doing the same thing over and over again and it kept working. And then all of a sudden you swap out one piece and it doesn't work anymore. They need to have a plan for how to adjust. Again, it was a lesson they learned last year. I think it cost them the 1st seed. We'll see how they handle it in 2025. Now, we just talked a lot about the aforementioned Brian Flores as well as the aforementioned Kevin O'Connell, but they are not the only 2 really good coaches on this staff. Exceptional staff overall in Minnesota. That's one of the reasons why they survived all of the injuries that they did to even challenge for the 1 seed. And they got damn close to doing it. Obviously kind of fell apart a little bit late in the year, but overall, I think that was as good of a year as Vikings fans could have ever hoped for, considering where the expectations were going into week 1. Like, people have to remember what the mindset was going into week 1 last year. It was like, JJ's hurt. We're starting Sam Darnold for the year. Like, I don't know, maybe we can win like 9 or 10 games. And then 2 months later, it was like, can we get the 1 seed? Can we win the Super Bowl? Like, you have to understand where they were supposed to be and where they ended up. That doesn't happen without a really good coaching staff, which the Vikings obviously have.
Yeah, I want to talk about Kevin O'Connell sort of off the field. It's still on the field, but we've been talking about his schematic brilliance, and I don't think that's up for debate after his first couple of years in Minnesota. But one of the things I really appreciate about him is how he handles people, and that's both players and coaches that work underneath him. And this is the part where I just pound my fist on the table and get really upset that the NFC North coaching structure is so strong, because we had a lot of questions about Dan Campbell before he arrived in Detroit. He has proved to be a tremendous leader that is very adaptable. And Kevin O'Connell the same way. Like, Kevin O'Connell, I think, had the bona fides for everything schematically. He'd played in the league. He'd been under a lot of other good coaches. He had a full understanding of offense, and that's why he was hired. But I think the added bonus, or the benefit that Minnesota's gotten from Kevin O'Connell's tenure and leadership, is how well he relates to people. And you see it not only in his own players, but even players that he got familiar with in the draft process that ended up on other teams, and how he interacts with them on the field after games. Kevin O'Connell is a real people person, and that pays dividends when you have to go through all these changes and adversity and everything else. And he's proved masterful off the field as on, and that's a rare combination in the NFL. So he deserves his flowers for that. We'll talk about the GM for just a second. Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah, very, very smart individual, analytics focused. That was probably what most people concentrated on when he was hired. I think the Vikings have been very good in that area. When you look at the draft history, I think it's wanting, especially on day 3. If you look at not last year's draft or this year's draft, the 2025 draft, but 2024, 23, and 22, you see some role players in the second day, but it really does drop off. Again, hit some high notes, especially last year. But look, if you have 2 top half of the first round picks, you should get 2 quality players out of that. Now, JJ got hurt. That's out of his control. Dallas played really well, I think, especially for a rookie, and I think the arrow's still pointing up. But if you start to look at what I think really defines whether or not a GM is a good drafter, not so many gems later on, and he's going to have to overcome that. And typically a way that a team has to do that is in free agency, because they end up with holes on their roster and they have to go fill them. Some GMs are masterful at that. Kwesi has built a very good roster, and one of the things that I really like about what he's done this year that we'll talk about later on is replacing some of those holes in the offensive line, and again, coming up with a plan B. So if you lose a player on the offensive line, you're not just running play action and really running for your life in the passing game. But on to those coaches underneath Kevin O'Connell on this Vikings staff. Mike Pettin is the assistant head coach, was in Green Bay for a long time, obviously has the respect of Kevin O'Connell and the rest of these coaches. The offensive coordinators, Wes Phillips, defensive coordinator, Brian Flores. We've talked about him quite a bit. Special teams, Matt Daniels. Some of the other notable coaches on offense who both have done a good job and have big jobs in front of them. In the have done a good job, Keenan McCardell is the wide receivers coach. And the Vikings had one of the better, I'd say, more underrated wide receiver 3s that they moved on from prior to last season. They did take one of those late round picks, Jalen Naylor, swap him into the offense, and again, didn't miss a beat, was a top 10 scoring offense. Keenan McCardell deserves praise for the ability to do that with a not largely heralded player on what was a very high-powered offense. And the 2 guys really that are going to have J.J. McCarthy's back this year are Josh McCown as the quarterback's coach and Jordan Taylor as the assistant offensive coordinator and assistant quarterback's coach, which is also an interesting mix. Haven't seen that on other staffs, but Josh and Jordan are going to have to try and, again, feed JJ through the fire hose when he is out there for the first time for a full season, hopefully, looking at NFL speed, having defensive coordinators try and frazzle him. And those are the guys that have a lot of experience that he can come back to the sideline, pick up the tablet, say, what did I miss? And, Josh McCown, one of the longest careers as a backup in the NFL, had some starter reps in there as well, played for multiple teams. I feel like half the teams in the league at some point, and has pretty much been there, done that, seen it, and can be a real sounding board for JJ in his first full season. On defense and special teams, Durante Jones is the defensive pass game coordinator and the DBs coach. So we talked a lot about that front seven. But again, not all the high draft picks for the Vikings have worked out in the secondary. Most notably, some of them have flamed out and been traded. However, they held up very, very well last year, and Durante Jones definitely deserves credit for that and is going to have to continue that. You know that you're going to get pressure on the quarterback, which certainly helps your coverage, but you also have to hold up because you are putting yourself in positions, as you outlined, where you're moving players out of position and leaving gaps, and you can get burned big if that happens and your secondary is not on their coverage assignments. Durante Jones, keep him in line, keep this defense humming along.
You mentioned the investments in the secondary that Kwesi's made over the years that haven't worked out. And while you were talking, I Googled their draft history because I was like, I need to refresh my memory on this.
Yep.
The 2022 class, that's a class that gets people fired, right? Lewis Cine, Andrew Booth, Ed Ingram, back to back to back. And especially at the positions, right? It's one thing to say like, oh, he took Lewis Cine over like Trey McBride around late. It's like, okay, well, then we're looking for a tight end, right? But if we're just talking about the DBs in that draft and the evaluations that they had, so Lewis Cine, Andrew Booth, they took them 10 picks apart. Here's some names that were on the board while they were making those picks. Jalen Petrie, Kyler Gordon, Jaquan Brisker. Unfortunately, he's had injury issues, but he's been a good player when he was healthy. Alante Taylor. I'll throw Trey McBride in just for fun because most teams passed on Trey McBride. And I know you were a big fan of him. I look at Tariq Woolen, who was like a day 3 gem in that class. And people say, you can't predict day 3 picks. Go look at our gems episode that year. Tariq Woolen was a gem for bootleg. So at least we got something right eventually. But also 1 round later, Kirby Joseph also was a DB draft in that class. So not ideal, Kwesi, to attack the secondary that hard and take 2 of the only DBs early on in that class that not only didn't live up to expectations, but straight up busted, like almost immediately straight up busted. Like that's a rough class right there.
It is. The best parts of those classes are farther down. Ty Chandler in the 5th round. Again, Jalen Naylor was a 6th round pick, one of 2 6th round picks for them that year. So you would think, and again, strong start, you'd be like, hey, that's really great. He finds players deep in the draft. Obviously, you want them to hit the top picks. They can't, you need to do both. And then when you go on and look at players that he's picked since then in the later rounds, there's not a lot of keepers there. And it makes me look at this year's draft class, which we'll talk about in a little bit differently. I might not give him quite as much benefit of the doubt based on really 2024 and 2023 and the late rounds there.
A little while back, I was kind of doing a study on how hitting on draft picks affects positional spending and free agency. And Nathan did a phenomenal job kind of putting together a chart of showing like percentages of rosters that are made up of 1st round pick, 2nd round pick, 3rd round pick, day 3 guys, who are homegrown talents, who are 3rd-party free agents, who are UDFAs. And the correlation that we found through that study was that teams that miss on draft picks tend to have an average of 2 more starters that are 3rd-party free agents that they bring in from outside, which are always going to be way more expensive than homegrown free agents, right? Because you're not signing them early, you're signing them when they hit the market. So not only are you bidding against other teams, but you're also bidding at the absolute peak of their value rather than paying them early. And so if you look at teams that consistently miss in the draft, they then have to spend way more. And, their productive snaps per dollar spent goes down, I guess is the best way to phrase it, right? And so you look at the Vikings spending spree this year and you're like, all right, cool. Yeah, they're filling in a bunch of gaps in free agency, but it's like, yeah, they're filling in a bunch of gaps in free agency because they had to, because they really shit the bed drafting. So I'm going to go through their entire free agency here. Again, if you want the entire transaction list for guys lost, guys retained, as well as third-party additions, we have those on the infographic as well at the link in the description below or the QR code on the screen. We'll just talk about the notable ones on screen here, but if you want the full list, that's available. So losses, Stephon Gilmore is gone, Shaq Griffin is gone, Dalton Reisner is gone, Jonathan Bullard is gone, Jahad Ward, gone, Daniel Jones, they did try to keep him, but he thought he had a better shot to start in Indy, which is probably true. Like he might actually be their week 1 starter there, so more power to him. He's a Colt. Cam Bynum, this one hurt. I thought Bynum's been a good player for them. He is also a Colt now. They paid him $15 million a year. Patrick Jones II is now a Panther at $7.5 million a year. Sam Darnold, who they also tried to keep, but Sam also was like, I have a better shot to start long-term in Seattle. So again, the Vikings tried to keep a veteran here just in case McCarthy had difficulties coming back from injury, but everybody knew that JJ is going to be the guy. So nobody wanted to stick around and just to lose their job, right? So Sam is a Seahawk. Cam Robinson, this is more addition by subtraction, is now a Texan. Fuck my life, EJ. Because he was not good in Minnesota last year. And then Ed Ingram, also addition by subtraction, is a Houston Texan for some godforsaken reason. When I say that after the Darisaw injury last year, this team had some of the worst pass protection in the NFL, I am not lying. If you're looking at their week 9 onwards pressure percentage allowed, that was post Darisaw injury, they were the second highest rate of pressure behind only Seattle. And if you listen to the Seahawks episode, you know how apocalyptically bad they were. These were the only 2 teams that had a pressure rate allowed from week 9 onwards of 40+%. So they were not going to keep Robinson and Ingram for the sake of JJ McCarthy's health. Was not a good idea to do that. But Houston said, sure, yeah, we'll take them. That'll go well. We were so good in pass pro last year. Anyway.
Yeah, pre-Darisaw injury and post-Darisaw injury were really, they should just be 2 different volumes of the book. They're pretty darn competent while Darisaw was there and didn't have exceptional pressure rates. He left and the wheels fell off. Like Darnold he went from having a bunch of time and being able to scan and hit targets down the field, which is what he is excellent at, to, Sam, you're going to have to speed that up a little bit. You're not going to be able to do what you've been doing. And they figured it out, to their credit, really quickly. But within a week, it was very evident, we lost more than one player here. We only lost one player, but the impact feels like we lost 2 or 2.5.
Yeah, they replaced their entire interior trio because they had to. Like, they had no choice but to. It was awful. As far as retentions, Andrew Van Ginkel, one of our favorite players in the league. He is back once again in Minnesota, instrumental to the success of that defense as a guy who can both rush off the edge and drop into coverage. Harrison Smith, 36 years young and back at it once again. He's coming back for, I would say it's going to be his last year, but he's 36. So at this point, he could play till he's 40, and I would believe you. He was probably supposed to retire, keyword supposed to, like 4 years ago, and he's still going. So Harrison Smith, back at it again. Who knew? Byron Murphy, also back at $18 million a year. That's a pretty good deal for him. I'd say it's appropriate value, considering where the corner market is right now, with $30 million being the top of the market. Aaron Jones, somehow already 31 years old. He must have been like a 28-year-old rookie or something like that, because I don't feel like he's been in the league that long, but apparently he's 31. So he's back at $10 million a year. And then Josh Oliver, blocking tight end extraordinaire, nearly $7.8 million. Don't tell me the league doesn't value blocking tight ends. There's not as many of them as you think. Those are the notable retentions. Anything stick out to you there, Each?
I really like the Byron Murphy deal. Byron Murphy is a player who struggled with injury early on in his career and had flashes, but didn't stick with the team that drafted him. And it's really cool to see those guys show up in a different system, play well, and get rewarded. And I think he's done exactly that. Like you said, I think it's appropriate value. He looks much more like the player I thought he would coming out of college now. And I always love it when that happens because look, not everybody lands on their feet. Not everybody lands in a great situation. Not everybody stays healthy. And some guys never come back from that. They might get other chances, but they never sort of rise to the level of their talent. Murphy, I think, is a very solid player right now and a very functional one. And for 18 million, again, with where the cornerback market is, or even was when he signed this deal, certainly is now, that's a really good value for a player that I think is a solid contributor.
As far as third-party additions, we got Jordan Mason to fill out this running back room at about $5.2 million per year. Tavir Thomas, probably going to be one of their nickels and or dimes in that defensive backfield for about $2 million a year. So call it CB4, CB5, somewhere in that general vicinity. Ryan Kelly and Will Freeze, respectively, are going to be two of the new interior trio next to Donovan Jackson, who I assume is going to be the third of the new starters on their interior offensive line. Ryan Kelly at $9 million a year and Will Freeze at about $17.5 a year. Jonathan Allen, former Commander Great. You can call him Commander Great, right? He qualifies.
For sure.
$17 million a year. Still one of the better interior pass rushers in the NFL, in my opinion. Isaiah Rodgers coming over from Philly to also round out that DB room. And Sam Howell. EJ just can't let it go. Sam Howell going to be backing up JJ McCarthy this year. Do you think he's going to be a threat to the job, EJ? Please don't answer that.
I don't think he's going to be a threat to the job. I would ask you if you think he's better than Daniel Jones.
Ooh, that's fascinating.
Isn't it? Because it's basically the slot he's occupying. They tried to keep Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones, again, as you said, moves on. He gets the opportunity. Looks like he's going to be the week one starter in Indianapolis. And Sam Howell, they were going to move on from their, I'm just going to say quarterback room because it was Geno and Sam. But again, they traded for Sam to come to Seattle because he scared the living shit out of him the season before. I was at that game and he brought the Commanders back in that game. In a game that really they didn't have any business being close at the end. And they said, we think we might be able to do something with that. They end up letting him go. Now he goes to Kevin O'Connell. And I'm like, well, if Sam Howell is ever going to be anything, and again, he had some very high flashes, but he just couldn't control the turnovers. Sounds a little bit like Daniel Jones. So yeah, it's an interesting, all right, he's a little bit younger, certainly has less mileage on him. I don't think he's as much of a running threat, but he is a very good runner.
He scoot a little bit.
More than a little bit. His final year at UNC, the offense completely changed because he lost all his targets. And for the first 6 weeks of the college football season, he was the leading rusher in the country. So people are like, oh yeah, Sam Howell can run. I'm like, he can run a lot. It's not his favorite thing to do, but he's very skilled at it. Again, he's not going to be doing that in the pros. He doesn't have that kind of ability, but he's got the ability on a third down to pick it up for sure. And if he can limit the turnovers, I think there's ability there. Is he going to be quarterback one? Hell no. They drafted JJ, and I think JJ has a higher ceiling, but you could do a lot worse for a backup than Sam Howell.
The thing that kind of puts me over the edge for preferring Howell over DJ is they got Sam for $1 million.
That's correct.
And DJ costs 14. So again, if we're talking about productivity per dollar, that's pretty good. So that brings us to the draft. This might be the smallest draft class out of anybody, right? 5 picks?
Yeah, 5 picks and really 3 picks from late in day 3. 139, 201, and 202 made up the back 3 of those 5 picks. Only 2 picks on days 1 and 2. Their first round pick, number 24, Donovan Jackson. We mentioned his name, the guard from Ohio State. I say guard because that's where they're going to play him, but he was forced into service playing tackle for Ohio State, and a lot of people got really worried. He had to learn that position on the fly against the best competition in the country, and his first 4 to 5 weeks were awful. And a lot of people said, oh no, this might be the end of Ohio State's season. Then a funny thing happened. He got really good at left tackle. Good enough that people were like, was he playing out of position the whole time? Is he really a left tackle?
There were a lot of people that thought he could have played tackle in the league.
I do think he can play tackle in the league, and it's not because of those first 3 or 4 weeks where he was adjusting and struggling mightily to do so because he had to do so at game speed. after not playing tackle a lot. And then it's one of those guys where you have to watch a bunch of tapes and watch them in order, right? Because if you just look at the numbers weren't great overall. He was a little bit like the Rams last year. His first 4 weeks at tackle, which were in the middle of the season, were bad enough that they'd sort of made his stats at tackle, those splits. But if you split his games at tackle into the first half and the second half, and you just kind of throw out the first half and go, yeah, there are flashes there, but the stats overall in terms of pressures allowed and everything else don't look really good. And then you look at that, what turned into be a very clean second half. And one of the reasons that Ohio State went as far as they did, Donovan Jackson has left tackle ability. Like, you can say he's a better guard, and I think that's fair. He played very well at guard before moving to tackle. Again, was forced into that role, but getting a guy that has that versatility, that skill set, I think it was a great pick. They certainly needed him. I do believe he's going to start, and I believe he's going to be very good as a rookie. And if they ever have to slide him over, I mean, a la Joe Thuney, he can do it. And he's not going to have the same struggles that he did at Ohio State because he literally never played tackle. And basically they said, okay, best pass rushers in the country, go do it. And for 3 or 4 weeks, he looked really out of his depth, but then it clicked, and the tape after that was really good.
And what people have to remember is not every tackle can play guard, similar to how not every guard can play tackle. It's actually really hard to find somebody who can play both. And the reason is because when tackles are then kicking in to play guard, they have to relearn timing, and they punch differently. The timing is different. The angles are different. The strain is different. It's just not the same position, obviously. And then when guards are then kicking out to play tackle, especially on the fly, they have to learn whole new landmarks. Like, they have to learn on the fly where they're comfortable, because all of a sudden, it's almost like slow playing it, where like you have more time to read the defender and what they're trying to do to you, but at the same time, they're hitting you quicker. They're hitting you with a runway. And so you have to learn new body positions. Like, where's my comfortable spot where I have a good center of gravity, where I can anchor properly, where I'm not giving up the edge, but I'm also not oversetting, so I'm easily giving up an inside move. Like, where am I comfortable? What's my angle? What's my timing? How am I timing that up with my hands? How am I punching? Like, where's my strike zone, right? And it takes a while for guys to convert both outside to in and inside to out for that reason. It's just they're two very, very, very different positions. I would even say, to a degree, it's similar for guard and center, but more so with run blocking than with pass pro, because the angles are way different for a center and the responsibilities are way different for a center. So when you find somebody like Donovan Jackson who could play both, it's like Elton Jenkins, right? Or Michael Onwenu. Like, they're worth their weight in gold, because if we take an injury, we're not completely screwed because it's somebody who can do both. And if we're trying to just get our best 5 on the field, kind of like with Kansas City, where it's like, if our best 5 is Joe Thuney at left tackle because we don't have anybody else that can do it, cool, we'll roll with that, and we can make a Super Bowl with that. And Donovan Jackson is very, very valuable for that reason. If Darisaw gets hurt again, knock on wood, he could do it, and they would survive. And I think that's a good use of the 24th overall pick.
I think the runway would be a lot shorter too, because to your point, they're dealing with so much more space. When you move from guard to tackle, you go from having a defender hit you pretty much instantaneously in a phone booth to, okay, now I got to wait. Plus I got 3 or 4 yards of real estate on either side of me that I have to learn how to manage. So Donovan Jackson, very, very valuable experience at Ohio State. They did not have a second round pick. They move into the 3rd round, pick number 102, a pick they got from the Lions, which was a compensatory pick. Ty Felton, the wide receiver from Maryland. And Ty Felton is fascinating to me because we always say progression's not linear. Well, Ty Felton said, hold my beer. Here's his yardage totals from his 4 years at Maryland. 51, 309, 723, 1124. Here's his touchdowns. 0, 2, 6, 9. Like, Ty Felton got so much better every year he played. The real question is, has he hit his ceiling? Is there more there? Physically, he's going to have to fill out some. He's 6'2", about 180. He is slightly built, very fast, good hands. He has some return experience. There's been some talk already out of Minnesota that he might have a shot at either of the return jobs. He wasn't super experienced at Maryland, although he did return both kicks and punts there. But you've seen so much improvement. I'm thinking like Keenan McCardell's looking at Ty Felton going, if we just keep moving that curve out after you get used to the speed of the NFL, you could be a contributing starting wide receiver. And Minnesota seems really good at picking guys. I'm not going to say in the later rounds. Third is obviously on day 2, but they believe in Ty Felton, and Ty Felton has, paid off that belief, at least at Maryland with his coaches every year, improving in just about every functional way, and ended up with a tremendous final season there. So they spend their 3rd round pick on him and then move into those aforementioned day 3 picks. Round 5, number 139, pick they got from the Browns. Tyrion Ingram Dawkins, defensive tackle out of Georgia, who was a physical specimen and therefore was the focus of a lot of people looking at 3 of the players on the interior of Georgia's defensive line. We talked about a couple of them in the other episode this week about the Packers. Tyrion was a lot of people's favorites because he tested so well. For me, I actually liked Brinson better, and I thought he was a better value where the Packers got him down in the 5th or 6th round. But obviously the Vikings saw something in the physical profile and probably the tape as well that, again, in round 5, I'm not going to quibble with the pick. He is supremely talented physically, has a ton of SEC tape, and they could use the help on the inside. Then they moved to round 6, pick 201, pick they got from the Rams. Kobe King, the linebacker from Penn State. Went back and looked at my notes on Kobe King. He was not a linebacker that I was really excited about going to Brian Flores because he's an okay blitzer, but he needs to learn to disengage a little bit quicker. He's got range limitations to the outside. To me, he's a pure special teamer. And again, in round 6, that's probably who you're picking. Also in round 6, their last pick, number 202, a pick they got from the Texans. Gavin Bartholomew, the tight end from Pittsburgh. I actually think Gavin Bartholomew can play a little bit. He's got really good size.
I liked him, man. He's good.
He's not as fast as you might think, but he's not slow either. He doesn't look fast because he's really tall. But he does cover a fair amount of ground. He's good at the catch point. He's aggressive there, knows how to use his hands in blocking. He's not necessarily the best blocker, but technically he's pretty savvy there. And again, in round 6, like you said, the league does value blocking tight ends. I think that's an appropriate value in round 6, and I actually like the pick.
Yeah, I would say he's more smooth than fast, but as like a TE3, like a developmental TE3 that you hope can one day be like a CJ Fedorowicz, right? Like in his wildest dreams, he's a CJ Fedorowicz, which sounds like a backhanded compliment, but like CJ was a pretty good player. Like he's a starting tight end. I think it's a really good pick for late in round 6. Tyrion Ingram Dawkins, I'm a big fan of him. As far as like a flexible, movable chess piece along the defensive line who could play anything from a 3-tech to a 5 to line him up out wide. He's good against the run. He's obviously very comfortable with running stunts, both as the picker and the looper, because he did that a ton at Georgia. That's kind of like how they rush the passer. So I think he's a natural fit in the Brian Flores defense because he's done all that kind of stuff before. And then Ty Felton, kind of a sneaky pick because I don't think Minnesota is going to fall into the trap, especially considering how much money they just spent this year and how much they paid Justin Jefferson, and then like let's just assume JJ McCarthy's working out and they're already planning for that eventual extension in like 2 years, I guess it would be. I don't think they're going to pay Jordan Addison, right? Because they just paid a bunch of dudes and they still have more guys to pay. I really don't think they're going to pay Jordan Addison. So he's going into his 3rd year now. If he has a really strong year as a number 2, I think that they could offload him for a pick, especially because like they don't need him to be a number 1. Like they're just hunting for a number 2. And if they think that Ty Felton can be a quality number 2 to, again, Justin Jefferson, one of the greatest receivers that we've ever seen, I don't really think you have to then go pay $25 million a year for JJ to have a running mate. Like this isn't Cincinnati. Like we have other shit we can do with that money. So I think Addison is not long for this world. I think he's going to, or not long for this world. He's going to be alive. Maybe not long for Minnesota. I think he's going to have a strong 2025 and then probably go get paid somewhere else next summer. But that necessitates the Ty Felton pick because we got to get people in the pipeline, right? Like we got to start figuring out who the heir apparent at number 2 and or current number 3 is going to be. And if they don't see development from Felton this year, like, all right, fine, we can come back and use a day 2 pick on it next year. But either way, I don't think Addison's going to get paid here.
Okay, 2 things. One, you're going to the Kyle Shanahan school of pulpit quotes here. I don't even know if he's going to be alive next week.
You never know, man. He's not exactly a great driver, so I'm sure his insurance premiums aren't super low either.
And number 2, if they do pay Jordan Addison, please take a baby aspirin before you react to it online. I don't want you having an aneurysm over that too.
At this point, any team that pays 2 receivers top 15 receiver money or top 10 receiver money even, they're just asking for what happens next. Like, you already have one of the best dudes on the planet. Like, the Texans had Andre Johnson. They didn't pay Kevin Walter top 10 receiving money, right? They had Julio Jones, young Julio Jones, and they also had Roddy, but they weren't also then continuously paying to have a high-end number 2 next to Julio. They drafted well. They surrounded them with other complementary weapons like Taylor Gabriel, but like, they weren't paying 2 top 10 contracts a receiver because they had Julio Jones, right? Like, even the Bears, when they had Marshall and Alshon, like, you can have 2 top receivers without paying 2 top receiver money. But like, if you're going to pay one, and then fill number 2 with draft picks or something like that. But like, you have a really good head coach. You have an alpha number 1. You have an improved offensive line. You have a young quarterback we like. Like, if you're paying that much for 2 receivers, like, that's just bad team building.
Heck, you're getting production out of Jalen Naylor, so you can do it. And like you said, they have this year to figure out what Ty Felton really brings them and where he fits in their program and their plan moving forward. And then they can spend a pick next year if they need to.
As for UDFAs that they brought in to supplement this very, very small draft class, a couple really, really good ones that I also thought could have gotten drafted. So maybe we can just pretend that some of these are draft picks. Logan Brown, the offensive tackle out of Kansas, very talented. We thought he could have gone as early as like the 3rd or 4th round. There were some other issues that led to him being a UDFA. But as far as like talent goes, really, really talented kid. I think he makes this team. Tyler Batty, I was a huge Tyler Batty fan. I was actually very surprised he didn't get drafted. He is another one of these big body edges. He's not Aiden Hutchinson. I'm not making an Aiden Hutchinson comp, but I'm talking about like body type and preference for being a stand-up edge as a bigger body. Like, Aiden Hutchinson, early on, especially in his college career, was predominantly a hand in the dirt DE. And then they started standing him up more late in his career at Michigan. He was like, oh, I actually like this a lot better. I have better vision as a stand-up rusher. And so he started then being more stand-up rusher in the pros as well. Tyler Batty's very similar. He's like a 275, 280 pound body type that prefers being a stand-up edge because he can use his height and length and his vision, being a taller guy, to see the ball, stack, shed, make plays as a run defender on the edge. Like, he's a really, really strong run defender. And also he's a pretty crafty pass rusher too. Not a great athlete, but he's crafty. He's high motor. He's all of the gritty white dude stereotypes that you want to roll in there, but like, he's just a really, really solid player. Benjamin Urasek, I have a fun little note about Ben Urasek. His grandfather invented the baby carrot.
Yeah.
Joe Huber, the guard from Wisconsin, and Bryson Nesbitt round out our notable UDFAs. Nesbitt, they listed him as a TE, but is he though? Like, I almost would try to convert him to receiver and just have him just be like a big slot type. I really don't know if he's going to be a tight end, at least how we think of tight end.
Yeah, more the power slot role. And I think that is the same for Urasek. And I think it might be Urasek, but I'm going to be wrong about that. So Joe Huber is a great get. And like you said at the top, this is really where Kwesi made some hay. Like, I have been pretty critical of quite a few front offices already in this series of not indulging in the UDFA process, or really not winning in the UDFA process, because it is a competition. There is now somewhat limited money in terms of what you can use to sign UDFAs, and sometimes you try and it just doesn't work out. It's like free agency or anything else. But to look at this UDFA class and see 4 guys, I would say 4 of the 5 guys we highlighted, all with draftable grades. Definitely Logan Brown, obviously some off the field stuff that kept him, but his tape, there were teams that I talked to at the combine that were talking about him as a possibility at the end of day 2, as a late 3rd round compensatory pick based on tape and skill alone. Tyler Batty, to me, he's a heavy-handed edge setter. He's a, pocket container, pocket crusher off the edge. He's not bendy. He's not super fast. He plays really hard. He is heavy-handed, but those guys get paid in the NFL and they have long careers. They go from team to team doing that dirty work on the end of the line. Everybody needs them, and Tyler Batty can do it. Jurasik, again, had a lot more, I think, promise when he was at Stanford. He didn't really get used a lot when he went to Georgia, but it's still there as a receiving tight end who is fluid. Nesbitt, power slot, call him what you want. He was a borderline for me. He could have been drafted. I thought he was probably a priority UDFA grade. And then Joe Huber to be able to add to the interior of that offensive line, which we've talked about for the entire episode, the Vikings need to do to get a talent like Joe Huber from a somewhat local school over in Wisconsin, who is just a stout farm kid. Like Joe Huber looks like just the guy that was like, hey, Joe, we need that barrel of corn moved. And he just went over and went, oh, I got it. Right.
Yeah. So he's a Wisconsin offensive lineman.
Right. Or a Nebraska.
They have like 4 of these
lineman.
dudes every year.
Anyways, that is a tremendous amount of it basically doubles your draft class. It's almost as if you didn't have 5 picks, you had 8 or 10. And if any of those guys make the team, and I think 3 or 4 of those guys make the team, whether it's the 53 or the practice squad, you have just added a lot of talent for almost no draft capital. I mean, yes, you do have to use some signing dollars for UDFA, but they're minimal compared to any draft picks. So that's a really good job by the Vikings scouting staff.
So kind of rounding out this show here for our 3 questions that we circle back to that make up the central pillar of this series. What was their identity before? What do they want their identity to be now? And what is the goal for this season? Their identity before was play action, explosive plays through the air, get on you quick, score early, put you into a compromising position where you feel like you have to keep up. And so you kind of get away from whatever your plan was going into the week, and you let Brian Flores just blitz you to death. I almost feel like this team, that Mike Tyson quote, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth. Like this team tried to punch you in the mouth as quickly as possible so that whatever your plan was just disappeared. And it worked generally. As far as what they want their identity to be now, I feel like they might try to be a little bit more, not run heavy, but more effective as a run game to take some pressure off of JJ McCarthy. Because I think asking him to be everything that Sam Darnold was for this team, i.e. an offense that really did the vast majority of their damage through the air than on the ground, that's a little much to ask for a guy who's going to be starting his first regular season game. So I do feel like they want their identity to be a little bit more leaning more into being an effective run game than just an effective play action pass game. And then identity on defense, I don't know why they would ever change it, so I wouldn't. And then as for the goal for this season, I know it's easy to say they were in contention for first seed last year. They were in contention for division last year. That should be the goal. Win the division, get the first seed, go on a run. This roster's ready. They can do it. I understand that. And I don't necessarily disagree with wanting your very aggressive franchise to keep being aggressive. And I'm sure everybody in the building is thinking, we were close last year, let's do it this year. But as an outside observer, as the media member that I am, my one goal that I want this team to accomplish this year is just make JJ McCarthy work. Like, just make him comfortable, have him have a good first year as a starter, protect him, catch the ball, no more stupid drops, be an effective run game. Get me some turnovers in enemy territory to give him some really easy drives, like give him some wins as far as having easy possessions that start on like the 45-yard line. Like, just make him comfortable and make him work. Because if JJ McCarthy works in Minnesota, their window is not 2025. Their window is 6, 7, 8, 9 into 2030. Like, I'm really more thinking long term here. So let's just not put too much on his plate right now. This, just treat it as his real rookie season and develop him. And if they somehow win the division while doing that, great. But I'm not really thinking about 2025. I'm more thinking about 2026 and 2027 because that's where like the actual Super Bowl window to me really begins.
If you want to talk about what they want the identity to be this year, I think about a 20% slice of the offense. And they're really going to start it with re-solidifying the offensive line. All offense starts with having a good offensive line, but I think they want to take a 20% slice out of what was the passing game last year. Because again, if you expect JJ McCarthy to measure up, we said at the top of the podcast, that would be an all-time rookie season. If he hits 80% of that, it's a very good rookie season. So if you could take that 20% slice of the passing game and improve the running game, that amount, if you can move up from, say, 22nd to 15th or 14th and have balance behind that rebuilt offensive line, be a little bit more balanced, take some more pressure off JJ's plate that way, I think if they can just sort of reappropriate that 20% of the offense from the passing side to the rushing side after they've stabilized that offensive line, ideally, then yeah, that can be considered a successful season. As for the goals, if they can maintain anywhere near a 14-win season, I don't care if it's 12 wins and they're close in the other games and they are in the hunt at the end of the year in this very tough division, that would be a massive win for what is essentially a season under a rookie quarterback.
I forgot to mention earlier, by the way, that I'm wearing a different Forgotten Bears receiver jersey today. For everybody watching on the YouTube version of the show, I had Moosin earlier in the week. Kevin White.
Hey, let's go.
Football podcast.
I'm wearing Dallas Turner's best shot at drawing a Viking. Our good friends over at Homage do this every year, and they take the rookie drawings where they attempt to draw their team logos. I don't know. I actually think Dallas did kind of a bang-up job on this one, so it's one of my favorites.
One of my mods, Alex, just continuously sends me the most random off-the-wall jerseys he can find for like $4 on eBay, and I love him dearly for it. So I am now the proud owner of this Kevin White jersey for the rest of my life, which honestly, in like 20 years, I'm going to show up to a game at, well, it won't be at Soldier Field. It'll be at whatever stadium the Bears are playing at in 20 years. I'm going to be wearing my Kevin White jersey, and I know I'm going to see a couple double takes. People are like, really, dude? Like, not Matt Forte, not Brian Urlacher.
You're just going to have people tell you to be very careful going down the stairs because you need to protect your knees.
Oh, man. All right. Well, hope you guys enjoyed today's show. Tomorrow, we have another heavy hitter. The Detroit Lions are on the block. And then on Friday, we have our patron-only division recap episodes over on the Patreon where we pick our NFC North division winner. So I know that one's going to be a banger as well. We're picking our MVP of the division, offensive and defensive player of the division, rookies of the year, coach of the year, as well as bold predictions for the NFC North. So if you want even more bonus content, not just the companion infographic that has all the data that we talked about today and more, but if you want those bonus episodes, those are over on the Patreon. Lions up next, and I don't think I have anything else for you. So we will see you same time, same place tomorrow.